Coming up next is the Dr. Kim Taylor Show. Here's your chance to talk about what matters to you. Although you'll receive helpful advice from Dr. Kim, remember this is not to be construed as any form of psychotherapy, diagnosis or treatment, and cannot replace a therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional. You can reach Dr. Kim by calling 564-1290 or 866-564-1290. You can also listen live on the internet at drkimtaylorshow.com. Now, here's Dr. Kim.
Today's topic is conscious uncoupling. Now, many of you may have heard this term when Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin announced their upcoming divorce. But simply put, it's about how to break up without leaving behind shattered lives and broken relationships, and instead being able to forge a path of mutual respect and kindness. We all enter into relationships hoping that they will last forever and that we will live happily ever after if we just love each other enough. But the truth is that we live in a world where our divorce rate is now at an all-time high, with half of marriages ending up in divorce court. And this often leaves couples and families devastated for years by the acrimony, the tension, the bitterness between the parents. So it seems really important that we start to open up a discussion on how to divorce, which offers a new way to end a romantic union where no one needs to end up shattered and destroyed. And in fact, the ending can be with dignity and respect for each other. Today, my guest is Catherine Woodard Thomas. She is credited with popularizing the term conscious uncoupling. She is the author of the national bestseller, Calling in the One, 7 Weeks to Attract the Love of Your Life. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, co-creator of Calling in the One and Feminine Power online courses and certified coaches trainings. She's also the creator of Conscious Uncoupling 5-Step Process, which is another online course. And now the newly released book, Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After. So join us today as we are talking about changing the concept of divorce and how you can use this difficult situation to learn about yourself and to create a new flourishing life after divorce. So if you have a question, if you would like to join in, if this is something that is happening to you and you would like some feedback about that, call us at 805-564-1290, or you can send in your questions to me via my email at drkim@drkimtaylorshow.com. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor, and I'll be right back after this short break with my guest. Stay tuned.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
My guest today is Catherine Woodard Thomas, author of Conscious Uncoupling. And this is 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After. So today we're talking about a new way to end a failing relationship that creates minimal damage to each other and promotes healing and wholeness instead. Welcome to the program, Catherine.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
In your first book, Calling in the One, you are really known for helping people to get into loving relationships, not out of them. So what inspired you to create the Conscious Uncoupling program?
Well, that's a great place to start. I mean, I am, a licensed psychotherapist, and I've also had the privilege of teaching so many people in my online learning communities over the years. But the truth is that I write everything from my own personal experience. So it's really straight from my heart and my own learning. And Calling in the One was about kind of the journey that I had had as a woman who'd been single for many, many years and had been struggling with patterns of unavailability and one heartbreak after another. And I set a very powerful, kind of an outrageous intention that when I was 41 years old, I was going to be engaged by my 42nd birthday, but I had the presence of mind to not frantically try and, just go out and find someone to get married to. I went within to really take stock of my own inner barriers to love, and started to align my actions and my choices with that future without knowing if that future would happen or not. And lo and behold, I really created a miracle of love for myself, and I was engaged before my 42nd birthday and married the next year, and then I gave birth to my child when I was 43. So I was so filled with gratitude that I'd been able to manifest this miracle for myself. And, and I think a lot of people know that we therapists go through so much, and that in many ways we're inspired to really understand the human psyche because of our own journey. So to have that kind of win, of course I wanted to share that with people, and that became the Calling in the One process. And to date we've sold about 200,000 books, and I've taught tens of thousands of people, so I feel very privileged. However, 10 years into that relationship, my husband and I decided to unmarry and to get a divorce. And I have to tell you that I didn't see it coming. We actually had a very kind of calm relationship and a very loving relationship. And now, of course, in hindsight, there were choice points where we were growing apart, and we weren't really noticing it as it was happening. But we did get to a point in our marriage where it really felt like the right thing to do. I'm happy to say that, a few years down the line, I still think it was the right thing to do. But we went through our divorce with so much care and so much gratitude and so much generosity. And, I'm a person who, I told you before, I've had a lot of upheaval in relationships. So I've been through the gain 50 pounds, start smoking again, lose half the hair on your head kinds of breakups. So when we got through it, I said, okay, this wasn't the life that I had planned, but this is the life that I have. So how am I going to make something beautiful of this in my own life? And then, of course, as a teacher, because I love my students, and how am I going to help them to make sense of this, and what good can come of this? I consider myself to be a gourmet lemonade maker in this lifetime. And so I really looked, and I saw, wow, we really did that well. And the people who were around us said to us, they've never really seen people go through their separation with as much consciousness and thoughtfulness and even generosity and goodwill woven throughout. And so, I kind of took that feedback to mean something, and I went and I mapped out what now has become the 5 steps to living happily even after. Because here's the amazing thing, is that my former husband and I do not just love our 14-year-old daughter together, but we in many ways still love each other, and we are really a great team. We have just transitioned our relationship into a new form of family. And that was one of the things that we really wanted with all our hearts when we did this, is we didn't want our daughter to have the experience of a broken home, and yet we didn't have a lot of models for what a good transition might look like to a new form of family. And that really became the impetus for Conscious Uncoupling. And to date, the book just came out this week. It's already the #1 bestseller in divorce, I'm so happy to say, in America. And there's a lot of people who've been taking the program and following in my footsteps, and they've been able to duplicate it. And they say that it's been a lifeline, not just, in terms of being able to even have a peaceful ending, but also in terms of being able to make sense of the breakup in a way that ends up really fostering a lot of lessons that are learned that can be implemented moving forward, and it alleviates a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Well, and I like what you said, that you had to go within to explore the barriers to love, because I definitely think that it is the work that we really do on ourselves to be open to love that is the most challenging work that we can do. So you are talking about whether you are looking for a new love relationship or whether you have to end one, that both of these are times that you can open yourselves back up and to really be able to explore who you are and what you do to help a relationship versus what you might do to hurt it.
Beautifully said. And I actually see that in many ways conscious uncoupling is what I would consider like a precursor to calling in the one, because I like to say that our next relationship will not begin when we meet our next partner, but with how we're ending the relationship with the last partner we've been with.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes, because if it's not done, it's not done, which means it leaks into your next one.
Mm-hmm. And also just the inner turmoil and the way that the relationship can live inside of us. Look, a relationship, we all know it doesn't end just because you've given the keys to the condo back. We're having an inner dialogue that can last not just months, but actually years with someone who has really hurt our heart or we feel betrayed by. And I want to say that I understand that, most people who read Conscious Uncoupling are not just coming at it from the perspective of they're not fortunate enough to have been married or partnered with a Buddhist like I was, who really takes his Buddhist practice to heart and wants to find peaceful ways to get along with everyone in the world. So I recognize myself as very fortunate in that regard. But the process actually works no matter how betrayed we've been, no matter how abandoned we feel, no matter how hurt the other person has made us, because, it kind of explains how easy it is, why people behave badly at the end of love. That there's actually, new neuroscience that's coming out that's kind of explaining this to us about how we go into fight or flight and we just go into attack mode, and how the nicest of us can begin to behave like sociopaths, or certainly we're tempted to. I've had those fantasies where you want to send all his clothes to the Goodwill kind of fantasies. But so the program actually works because no matter, even if the other person was 97% at fault, and that's the story we get stuck on, ruminating over and over how we've been mistreated or devalued or wronged in some way. We get very stuck in that story. But where we want to be really interested is in what our 3% is, because it's in understanding that, even if it was passive, like I didn't speak up, or I was dismissing my own deeper knowing, or I was turning away from the red flags because I was hoping that they weren't going to be true. All of those like passive ways that create that 3%, we have to know what that is, and we have to make an amends to ourselves to show up differently moving forward if we ever hope to trust ourselves to never make these same mistakes again.
Let's go back for just a moment. When you started to say that people typically behave really badly at the end of love, explain a little bit more about why that is. It sounds like what you're saying is something really kind of overtakes them.
I think it does. The studies in neurobiology are very interesting. All this new brain research that's coming out. And there's so much we still don't know about the brain, but we're finding out so much each day. And one of the things that we're finding is that our brains actually sync up with the brains of others who we're close to. And our bodies start to kind of go in the same rhythm, and our emotions are regulated by each other. So when we break an attachment bond, we kind of go a little crazy. We get really deregulated, and we go right out of the thinking part of the brain and into the fight or flight brain, which gets triggered because it feels like life or death. And a lot of experts think that is kind of a relic, an evolutionary relic of the past, because for thousands of years, if you wandered away from the tribe, you were likely to die. And so we're kind of hardwired to stay together, and nature doesn't really like it when we move away from our loved ones too quickly. And in fact, nature will keep us involved negatively and go to forming a negative bond sooner than it will to the existential angst of completely just letting go and coming back into your own autonomy and own separation. So it's really helpful to understand what's happening in our bodies when we break up. I think Judith Herman, who's one of the experts on trauma in our world, she's from Harvard Medical School, she calls a breakup the rupture of attachment, and she likens it to one of our our critical traumas. And in fact, brain studies will show that a person who's undergoing a breakup has the same brain patterns as someone who's undergoing the death of a loved one.
So as you're saying all of this, just explaining it in this way, and for people to understand that their partner probably wouldn't act so badly, or you wouldn't act so badly unless you were in trauma. And so it opens it up that perhaps you can start to find some compassion, and that would change how you felt about the person involved, which would help you then to do what you're talking about, is to find a way to work through this unmarrying process in a way that is both respectful and kind to each other.
Yes, absolutely. And we can't just deny that we're having those big feelings, big anger, big desire for revenge, big hatred. They're going to have their way with us on some level. They are what we are feeling. So, and in many ways, what happens is we don't have command of ourselves because we are so obsessed with those feelings. We're so taken over. So one of the things that I do in the first step of conscious uncoupling is find emotional freedom, and I teach people a very simple practice that is really psychologists have been calling affect labeling. I think it's Matt Lieberman at UCLA has done this whole study where if we just put a name to our feelings, that we start to have them rather than they have us. It puts us back in the driver's seat. So in other words, if you can just say to yourself, Catherine, honey, what are you feeling right now? Instead of lashing out, you press the pause button, you say, Catherine, honey, what are you feeling? And of course, you're going to be flooded with a lot of different feelings, so if you can isolate them, I feel bereft, I feel enraged, I feel humiliated, right? And I teach people just to, okay, I see you feel bereft. I see you feel humiliated. I really see that. And then, if you're really overtaken, there's other parts of the practice that I bring in which have to do with being able to really hold and contain those experiences and even begin to harness the energies that are underneath them and point them in the direction of positive change in your own life.
We are going to come back and we're going to start to talk about how can you turn this typically horrible experience into something positive. We're talking about conscious uncoupling. I'm here with Catherine Woodard Thomas, the author of the very newly released book, Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
How can you move forward after a painful breakup? If you are just joining me, we are talking to Catherine Woodard Thomas about her approach to turning breakup grief into personal transformation. Catherine, what exactly is conscious uncoupling? Let's just define that.
Okay, thank you. Well, conscious uncoupling, as I developed it in 2011, is a 5-step process for how to end a romantic relationship in mutually respectful, honorable, gracious, and very kind ways. And it's basically a roadmap for how to do minimal damage and how to set everyone up to win moving forward. And conscious uncouplings are actually known for their acts of kindness and their gestures of generosity and goodness, and really for the efforts that are made to do the right thing for the right reasons.
So what can people do to turn what's typically a very horrible experience in their life into something positive?
Thank you. Well, that's, I think whenever I say what a conscious uncoupling is, people go, oh my gosh, is that even possible?
Yeah.
Like, I would love to do that. How nice is that? That's, the world we all want to live in, but it's not the reality of, how things actually are. So conscious uncoupling starts where we are. And so that has to be this ability to live from our ethics and not our emotions. And we all know how easy it is for things to turn ugly. So there's a way that we want to aspire to that, almost like a North Star. That's the goal that we're aspiring to, because we want to remember that every action we take, every choice that we make during this period of time is planting a seed for our future, and we're going to be eating from the fruits of that garden for many years to come. And so we kind of want to get a handle on those hot emotions and be able to harness the intensity of the of the feelings and use it in terms of our own growth and our own development. For instance, if you're feeling a lot of anger, you want to be able to say, okay, underneath the anger is righteousness that I deserve, is the reclamation of my right to be treated well, and is the reclamation of my right to have a partner who doesn't lie to me, who tells me the truth, who is honorable and decent, right? So that's a good thing. That reclamation is a good thing. And it's going to require a lot of growth in order to begin to align your life with a playing field where people are mirroring back to you your value, people are treating you well, where your relationships are respectful and congruent and in integrity. So that's the journey that the Conscious Uncoupling program invites us to take. Mm-hmm. And so we want to step out. You can see that even if we've been victimized, we're going to look for gaining our power by looking to see, how we can be responsible for ourselves as the source of whatever's happening. Now, where people get stuck on that, Dr. Kim, is that people don't understand how to self-reflect in a way that's self-respectful. So we will, when we go to self-reflect to try and understand, what was my part in this, what we're going to find are questions like, what's wrong with me? How could I be so stupid? Why doesn't anyone ever love me? Mm-hmm. Right? And these questions are so shame-based, they're never going to lead to any kind of growth or development, and certainly they're never going to be a path to freedom. So one of the things I teach people in the program is how you can self-reflect in a way that's going to foster your own growth and development and help you to graduate from any painful patterns that you've had in love. So that's going to look like a question like, how did I give my power away? And what can I do to reclaim it? Or how do I treat myself in the same way that my former partner just mirrored back to me?
So what you're saying is that a person can do this, but I have this email that just came in, and I'd like to read it because the question at the end of it I think is very important, and maybe a lot of people are asking themselves.
Yeah.
It's from Kelly, and she says she's 49 years old, going through a divorce, and it feels like a very inconvenient time in my life to be having not only a breakup of my marriage, but a breakdown in my life, and I'm having this identity crisis. My question is, how do I get my soon-to-be ex on board with being willing to work together? Because right now he's angry at me and perhaps the world and blaming everyone and not willing to take responsibility for himself. So what if the other person is behaving really badly? Does this still work?
I think the likelihood is that the other person's going to behave badly. Truthfully, I think, is it Karen? Is that Karen?
Kelly.
Kelly. So I think Kelly's situation is the norm, actually. Mm-hmm. And, in a perfect world, everybody has a divorce like Gwyneth and Chris, or like Catherine and Mark. But you and I know that that's probably not going to happen. But you see, Kelly's here. So Kelly has she's obviously, a person who works on herself and is willing to grow and willing to take responsibility. And I like to say that, anyone can do a conscious uncoupling because you don't have to be reduced by anyone else's bad choices. And we never want to give someone else who's kind of in a state of being in a lesser consciousness than us the power to determine who we're going to be. So she's the leader. And she's going to have to lead. So, I provide a lot of tools, actually, that de-escalate anger. He probably has good reason to be angry at her. It might not be anything she intended to ever hurt him with. Or maybe he's even in some kind of a story that has nothing to do with who she was, but it's his own, consciousness of his own story from his past that's kind of coming back up, and he's not even conscious of it or aware of it. But she needs to find a way to be in relationship with it where she can be at peace and she can lead the way towards de-escalating the conflict and introducing the idea of having a more harmonious breakup. And so it's going to require her to really rise to the occasion. But I think, if this is what life has given you right now, Kelly, then life thinks you're up for it. And on a soul level, I try and just like always remind us to stay out of victimization. So even if you have to go all the way down to your soul to say, okay, this might be something I've chosen. It's not anything I want to be going through. But you know what? Nobody wants to break their leg either. But people break their leg, just like our hearts are broken, our legs broken. If you broke your leg, you understand you're going to have to lay low, you're going to have to be in traction, you're going to have to go to physical therapy. There is a process that is not pleasant, that nobody wants to do, but that everybody is willing to do if you've broken your leg, because you know that on the other side of that treatment, you're going to come out stronger in the broken places than you've ever been before, because that's actually what happens with a bone, and it's what happens with our heart as well.
So the cornerstone of your book seems to be not only that you're not going to be defined by the divorce as a failure of love, but instead you're going to try to embrace it as a way to evolve and to transform yourself and to learn about yourself.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, that whole idea of failure, let's talk about that for a moment. I think when I was going through my own breakup, I, of course, felt what I think so many of us feel, which is I failed. I feel ashamed, and particularly because I'm a relationship expert and I'm leading the way on how to have loving relationships. I mean, I think I probably, even take the cake on having those feelings just from my situation alone. But it actually made me very curious about the standard that we are all holding ourselves accountable to. Because you see, guilt is like we feel guilty for something we've done. But shame, that shame that comes up at the end of love, where I'm just so embarrassed and humiliated because I have failed at this, is really because we have shame is all about failing to fulfill a cultural expectation. So it made me very curious about the happily ever after myth. And so in the book, I research the myth, and I find out that it was really only born about 400 years ago, and ironically from Venice, Italy. That's where the myth comes from. And the life conditions of the time are that people died before the age of 40. Most people, or the lifespan was 40, and that most of the children died before the age of 16, and that you were locked into a class system because there was a law on the books that forbid a nobler from marrying a commoner. And if you look at the happily ever after myth, there's always upward mobility. There's always great wealth at the end of that. So we're kind of have this, covert expectation that things will now be happy forever, and that we will be financially well, and that, and there's, joy in the kingdom or the queendom forever to come. And so when we do not fulfill on that, when the story doesn't go the way we expect it to, our bodies are flooded with cortisol, because that's what happens when we fail to live up to our expectations, and we become flooded with shame. And so it made me just very curious, and I started to look at, the differences between our culture now and the culture in Venice, Italy 400 years ago. And clearly we have almost doubled our lifespan from then, and we live in a mobile society. We live in a society where women do not need to stay married for economic purposes anymore, for the most part, on a cultural level. Not true for everybody, but for many. And so in a society, and really in any society throughout the course of human history, whenever women have risen to equal power to men, divorce rates rise to about the level that they are right now. And so in a world where over 40% of first marriages, over 60% of second marriages, and over 70% of third marriages will end in divorce, I invite us all to begin to rethink our ideals of love. Because inside of this assumption of failure, here's the thing, we never learned how to do this well. And that's why we make such a botch of it and make such a mess of things. And so conscious uncoupling is not pro-divorce. I'm actually obviously pro-marriage. I'm going to keep doing my calling in the one work. I'm a believer in love, and I fully intend to get married again myself one day. So I'm pro-marriage. I'm not pro-misery. And conscious uncoupling is an alternative to the antagonistic, hostile road that most divorces are and most breakups are. And it's inviting us also to even rethink and up-level the goals of love. And so instead of asking the question, like, how long did it last, to verify the value of a relationship, we're going to instead maybe ask questions like, what did I learn about love that I can now apply moving forward?
So what are some of the steps that you can share that it will help people to step out of their heartbreak and into this transformation that you're discussing?
Well, I think this piece about reclaiming your power and being willing to understand our role in the part of things in a way that's growth-oriented, where you're really willing to step back and from an almost objective place with deep compassion on ourselves to say, okay, really, what was going on for me? Like, what's my own ambivalence about being partnered? And, you know, what are my beliefs about relationship? And what are my beliefs about ourselves? And to be able to look at where we would need to make an amends to ourselves. You know, and maybe if we have, for instance, we see that we have a lot of codependent patterns. Well, you know, I disappeared myself and there was really no one left to love because I was so obsessed with people-pleasing or trying to bend myself into a pretzel to be what the other person wanted me. Like, where was Catherine? There was no Catherine anymore to love. So what's the amends I need to make to myself? Well, it's to start to speak my truth, and it's to start to be a person with opinions and a person with needs, and to begin to value myself enough to show up with more authenticity in relationship moving forward, right? So we have to turn whatever loss we've had, we have to turn it into a life lesson that's actually worth the cost. You know, and that's why breakups are like, you have the opportunity to get your life out of this. Because if you've just lost someone that you love, or if you're losing massive amounts of your wealth that you've acquired over the year, or you're losing half of the time with your children, you better get a pretty great life lesson out of that. The other thing is in step 3, I talk about break the pattern and heal your heart. And that's when we're, you know, duplicating those old wounds over and over again. So we want to step back and look at how those old stories from our childhood just replayed again inside of this relationship and begin to really see clearly the beliefs that have been running our love lives. And it's interesting that Kelly used the word identity, like my whole identity is now kind of shattered and disoriented because our identity is actually attacked in a breakup. And so you have almost a dual loss. You have the suffering of what it is to just lose someone that you love, and that actually is normal. And that is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of grief.
Mm-hmm.
If you love someone, we're going to go through that grief. But the unnecessary suffering is what we make the breakup mean about ourselves at the level of identity and the recreation of our identity. So step 3 helps us to really go back to those old painful patterns in love, because most often what will happen in a breakup is we will get the old painful wounding from our childhood identity reconfirmed. See, I really am alone. See, I'm really not good enough. See, no one really does want me, and they never will. So we want to be able to see what that story is, challenge the story, and then be able to move forward in a way where we can begin to recreate our lives from the deeper truth of our value, from the deeper truth of our power to create loving relationships and to grow our skills and capacities healthier so that we can create a happier experience of love moving forward.
So that is a lot to be able to learn from a past relationship. But what you're really saying is that you have to have a better relationship with yourself and to know yourself better so that then you can show up to be a better partner later on in life.
I think so, and to create a more authentic, richer experience of love moving forward. I mean, breakups really break us open.
Mm-hmm.
And they're nothing that any of us ever want to go through. And like a broken leg, if you are going through it, there is a way to use this as the opportunity of a lifetime to actually graduate from any of your old painful patterns in love and to awaken out of that old story. I think the major insult of a breakup is that very often we go into relationships because we think that person's going to fix the old story from our childhood, and then the betrayal is they end up re-wounding us in much the same way. So we have to graduate from that story. So those are the first 3 steps of the 5 steps, and they're all about our own inner development. Mm-hmm. And the final 2 steps are about how to actually then engage with your former partner in a way that's going to de-escalate conflict, set everybody up to win moving forward, and align the entire community on a healthy transition.
In your book, you state that if you have the courage to rise and take on heartache for all it's worth, then this book is for you. It definitely sounds like that. I am here with Catherine Woodward Thomas, and we're talking about her book, Conscious Uncoupling. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor. We'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
My guest for the hour is Catherine Woodward Thomas, author of Conscious Uncoupling. This book is full of helpful tools and strategies for dealing with how to heal your heart after a difficult breakup that brings both dignity and honor to each person involved. Catherine, let's go through the last 2 steps of your 5-step process.
Absolutely. Well, the 4th step is called Becoming a Love Alchemist, and it's really recognizing that we have the power to steer the ship in a different direction towards a more positive future, no matter what the other person is doing. And, I spoke with Dr. Frank Luskin when I was doing research for the book. He's at Stanford University, and he's a forgiveness expert, and he said something very wise. He said, forgiveness is really the end of the process, not the beginning. And if we try and forgive too quickly, what we end up doing is just kind of repressing our own feelings and not being authentic about what we're feeling. And so, you can do it as a goal, as an idea to aspire to. But by the time we have done all of this inner work and this inner reflection, I think we're much more ready to begin to be proactive in now forgiving the other person and forgiving ourselves and forgiving the situation. Because studies show that carrying resentment around is not just bad for us psychologically, it's actually bad for us physically. And it's as hard on the body as if we were a habitual smoker. And it actually sets us up, we're 20% more likely to have a heart attack if we're walking around with festering resentments and anger. And also, anyone who has children, we know that even if we're polite to our former partner, children are little energy sponges. They pick up on the eye rolls, or they pick up on the crossing, your arms at the size, or, whatever, the tenseness or the terseness of the lips. So we actually want to have what I call a clear field between ourselves and our former partner, particularly if there are children involved. And so I teach an exercise in Becoming a Love Alchemist, which is about really clearing the air and what brings resolution and completion to a relationship so that you can actually kind of de-escalate conflict. And it goes back to what Kelly was saying, too. She actually has a lot more power than she's aware of to get him off the warpath, to kind of destabilize him where he is and to calm him down a bit more. Now, he's going to have his own process, and maybe he's, a rageaholic to begin with, and she has no power there. But I think if she did some of the exercises that I'm teaching about how to really, how to actually clear the air from someone and to generate a lot more cohesion so that you can move forward without that kind of hostility underneath the surface, or even overt hostility going on.
This is even a book that you can pick up if you're in the process of needing to end a friendship. It doesn't have to be that it's a marital relationship. And that all that you're saying is that when somebody can come from their highest self and to work through these feelings and to act and behave in ways that make them proud of themselves, that in and of itself is going to have a profound impact on how they feel about themselves moving forward.
Yes, very, very much so. And I think a lot of us would like to do that and just don't have access to it. And I kind of am an access queen because I want us all to be able to live from our higher selves for real, not like in a way that, ends up making you sick down the road, but you're really free. Like,
Right.
what does it take to really be free? And conscious uncoupling is not actually about like the restitution of judgment or the getting everything right between you. It's actually the decision to make things right. And the goal of a conscious uncoupling is to be free.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
To move forward with kind of an unencumbered, light heart.
In your past book of Calling in the One, you said that you have to be truly available to yourself before you can be available to someone else. We have just a couple of minutes here. What would you say about that?
Well, I think that even if we are able to create the manifestation of one of our dreams comes true, that unless we're congruent and available to receive that into our lives, we will find a way to sabotage it. If it's incongruent with our own self-sense, with our own core identity, and with what we're really up to in life, we will not be able to really sustain it. And so a lot of my work is getting us really congruent with what it is to have happy, healthy lives across the board, and particularly in this area of intimate love.
Catherine, thank you very much for being here. How can people contact you?
ConsciousUncoupling.com has just been launched. I'm just loving this new website. And there's videos that you can watch where I'm teaching about the process, and there's a blog with a bunch of articles that I've written about the process that answer questions like divvying up assets and just, all sorts of different things that people go through in a breakup. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, they can go to the contact button at the bottom. You can always reach me there. I love hearing from people, and I do my best to respond to people's emails.
All right, Catherine Wood-Thomas, thank you very much for being here, and I will also include your contact information on my website.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and a joy. Thank you.
Great. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor, and I'll be right back with some closing comments.
You are listening to Dr. Kim Taylor on KZSB AM 1290.
Even if you are wholeheartedly going to engage in the process of conscious uncoupling, you're still going to experience the grief and loss, and it will not be pain-free. But what we've been talking about today, and what you can find further by going to her book, Conscious Uncoupling, is that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it is worth striving for so that you can learn to enlarge your capacity to love yourself and to love others in the process. So I do encourage you to buy her book at the bookstore. It's Catherine Woodward-Thomas, Conscious Uncoupling. So I want to thank you for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed this program. We are here every Thursday afternoon, live at 5. Listen to the rebroadcast of the show. They're Thursday evenings at 10 p.m. and then Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. right here at KZSB AM 1290. Now, if you can't do that, there is still another way that you can pick this up. You can download the free weekly podcasts on iTunes, and you can either go to the YouTube channel and find them there also, or you can go to my website and get all of the links at drkimtaylorshow.com. And of course, I do love to hear from you and love your comments, so send in your questions at drkim@drkimtaylorshow.com. I want to thank my engineer, Mark Giles, for helping me to get this show on the air. And be well until next week, when I'll be right back here live at 5 as I am every Thursday afternoon. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor, and until then, remember, nobody else has to change in order for you to feel better. And what you say to yourself about yourself in your own head is really all that matters. So think about that. It's not so much what other people say about us or even what other people think about us. It's what we think about ourselves. And our thoughts will affect our feelings, and our feelings will affect our actions, and our actions will change our life. I'm Dr. Kim Taylor. Take care until next week.